So welcome everyone to another Change Your Game with GTD podcast. Our goal in these podcasts is to support you in getting a little more done with a little less stress, utilizing the Getting Things Done or GTD methodology. I'm here as always with Todd Brown.
Hello.
Hey, Todd. And today, just as we were, getting ready to go on air, as it were, and decide what we wanted to talk about or what felt sort of current and in the air to address, maybe that's a better way to put it, is that it seems like a lot of people right now are sort of working on their systems, their tooling, as it were. We're all kind of, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. We're trying to figure out sort of what's next, sometimes personally, professionally, globally, frankly. And we all know that having good systems and having good tools can help us be prepared for whatever comes. At the same time, we often, as coaches and trainers, people sort of digging into the detail with people about what their systems really look like, find that people sometimes tend to overbuild. They actually tend to go a bit far with the ways in which they're trying to utilize technology, or they're trying to develop systems in either addition to or based on just their understanding of GTD that might be a bit complex, frankly. So, Todd, I'm just curious as an opener here, what's been your experience with that? Are there patterns? Are there certain types of people that gravitate toward building or overbuilding systems? Is it a common occurrence? Is it rare? What's been your experience with people in building or overbuilding their GTD systems?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is I've seen a lot of it and I've done a lot of it over the years. I'm an IT guy by background. You and I share that, and for many years I was just attracted to the tools, right? And so I sometimes call it, and I still do, feature chasing. There's that feature that they've just announced in the marketing for XYZ software, and boy, does that sound cool! And I've got to have that as part of my system. And I think in many cases, what ends up happening in those situations is that by chasing the feature, just because on the face of it, it sounds really cool, we end up not really thinking fundamentally about how is this really going to help in my system? What role does it play? Does it replace something I've already got, which is not as efficient or effective? If so, fine. Does it provide me with a new feature that I haven't had before, and I can sort of figure out within the GTD methodology, where I expect it's going to help, right? Is that the kind of thing that's going on? So yeah, I think, and to your question about who's drawn to it, again, I think anybody who's enthused by the technology per se, I think is at risk of this. And I'm not saying, being enthused by the technology is necessarily a bad thing, but I think that sometimes that enthusiasm, it can get in the way of effective implementation of some of this stuff. So Christmas is coming. I'm not trying to be the Grinch here, but at the same time, I think a little bit of careful consideration of what is this really going to do for me is quite a helpful way to look at it. I don't know. What do you reckon?
No, I think that's really true, and I can also put my hand up to that. And come on, we all wish we could say, hey Siri, do my weekly review for me, right? Right.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Hey Alexa, process my inbox to zero. But unfortunately, there is a little bit between point A and B that is our own brains. And I do find too, people that are paid to think about systems, project anything from project managers to IT people, really anyone that's seen the value. And as you say, there's huge value, and a lot of the features of technology are totally revolutionary, game changing, and amazing. We just haven't found necessarily that in any way eliminates the fundamental thought process necessary to identify desired outcomes and next steps in order to really orientate yourself effectively. So as I was thinking, and as you were talking, I was thinking that of all the kind of disciplines of IT, all the different parts of the stack, as it were, people sometimes call it, the different components of building out software and systems, I think probably the most useful discipline to consider when considering your own personal productivity system is that of user experience. And I think very often, I know I can tend to accept. They call it anhedonically adapting, which just means you're putting up with basically over time something that's not really working for you, but you've kind of resigned to it. Um, but I can certainly have been guilty of just adapting to suboptimal things and not really thinking about myself as a user and what's my experience been. Is this what I'm doing? Am I creating friction for myself? Am I creating the fact that I've got to click a lot more times to get something in or take something out? Is it really worth it? Is it really worth it for me to do all of those clicks? Is it helping me with that fundamental thing of feeling like I can trust my choices? So that was interesting. Just as you were talking, to kind of go, well, yeah, it's not database design. It's not out. Intense AI algorithms. It's really, is it intuitive or not? Is it simple to use? Is it straightforward to use? Has been my experience of when people are most successfully not overbuilding. I'm wondering if you have any war stories on overbuilding. Like, do you have any situations where someone just totally tried to assimilate themselves into the Borg, and go full RoboCop with GTD, or just curious what you've
RoboCop.
seen out there by way of overbuilding.
Happy to share, but I think any of you out there who manage to use the phrase anhedonic adaptation in conversations over the next little while, please do email us and let us know. I think you get extra points for that. Yeah, absolutely. I go back to one of the very first coachings that I ever did way back when, and it was somebody who just loved the tools, and boy, the tools and all of the tools were incredibly full of things, right? And in kind of rolling back the logic that he had to the extent that he'd used logic here, that he had used to sort of create his system, it was pretty clear that what he had done is he'd taken new tools that he thought were really cool and neat. And so, sometimes these were desktop based things or web based things or mobile based things, or sometimes they synced and sometimes they didn't. And what he hadn't really done, and he believed in his heart that he could make this all work somehow, right? But his own experience, back to your point about user experience, his own experience of it was anything but friction free, right? His own experience was it just took a long time to do everything, right? And because the system was so complex, his what we would call the reflect phase, right? So his interaction with the system and the way that he used it and the way that he trusted it or not to remind him when it was helpful to be reminded about things, that had fallen apart really in a lot of ways. So going back to your point about, I'm not using your word, but quite often I find, especially if I'm working with somebody who's brand new to GTD, and it's not really clear what the right structure is, right, of a GTD system, let's say, I'll start really simple, right? Let's have a projects list. Let's have a waiting for list. Let's have an agendas list, right? So a list of things I need to discuss with people, probably a someday maybe list. And then a fifth list that we'll just call actions, right? So 5 lists. And then, for those of you who are experienced GTDers out there in the audience, you'll probably recollect that we, generally speaking, end up with your next actions being broken down by what we call context, right? So where the action happens. Is it a phone call? Is it something I do on my computer? Is it something I can do out and about when I've just got my phone with me? These kinds of things. But what I find quite often is helpful is start at the really simple level of, no, they're all just next actions. And then as I work with the person, and as the system becomes, as the contents of the system become more full, as more things get added to the system, then it's really interesting to watch. It's almost as if very naturally the contexts appear, right? Because all of a sudden, okay, well, the list is getting quite big. If you're talking about a list of 25 or 30 things, it's going to be really hard to interact with that as productively maybe as you'd like to. Let's talk about within this list of 25 or 30 things, can you see any subdivisions? And most people very quickly will go, well, you know what? All of those things are things that really just primarily relate to my personal life. I'd like to be reminded about those when I'm at home. There you go. We've got a home list, right? So stripping it back, and again, for those of you who are out there and who are feeling like my system's overbuilt, too many apps, too many lists, too many whatever, you might want to start over and just keep it really simple. Go back to the basics, and let your own and let the contents of your system inform its structure.
That's such a great point. Yeah. Yeah, I would call it organic, right? That the system becomes organic and very practical.
Mm.
Whereas what I see sometimes is people, um, well, people getting a bit conceptual, right, and a bit abstract about it. You saying, for example, believing in your heart that this complicated system, will do it. It's like, yeah, it's it ought to work. It ought to all work this way. It ought to, be this incredible, complex, fancy thing. But the practical reality, I think, often can be very, very different. So I think that's a really, really good point. I think we are, at least our style, our approach is pretty ruthlessly practical. I would say, when we go in with people and we coach them, we go, how are we going to give you the relief you need, rather than, this ought to work, or this should work, or this seems like a great idea or a concept. And one of the things I come back to with all of that is, concepts kind of need to be sort of propped up over time, whereas practical things that work, you just don't as much. I mean, you have to support your system so your system can support you, but it's almost like you don't want that to become a dysfunctional relationship, like where you're supporting your system more than your system is supporting you, because you've got this idea of how it ought to be and you're working hard to make that idea happen, rather than getting back the practical benefit, of implementing simple things. So I love that you just go right back to next actions. And are they clear? Are they simple? Are they self-evident? And what are the real practical categories for you of where you want to see that list, where you want to see that happen? And I think sometimes people think that, going back to basics is sort of elementary and therefore unsophisticated or something. But in some way, our brains are incredibly sophisticated, but in some ways, they're really not at all. I think we got to recognize that, that in the heat of a crazy, crazy week full of back-to-back meetings, you don't want 12 buttons to push and 6 dials to twiddle and whatever for it to try and spit out the perfect next action. You need simple, straightforward marching orders, almost. And only you can set up those marching orders beforehand to make it really, really simple. I'm amazed sometimes how many managers who are really good at managing other people, really good at creating operational clarity for everyone around them. Oh, here's where we're going, and here's what it looks like, and here's what success looks like. Sometimes then, overcomplicate their own approach to the whole thing because they are so focused on strategy and the abstract kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's such a good point that's really bringing it back to basics. And it's tricky sometimes too, right? I mean, some of the people that I find their systems are most overbuilt are people who have been largely kind of self-taught. Um, and I've definitely found some things that are working for them that are cool and custom, but also in that process, I think have potentially strayed from just the ruthless practicality of, is this still working? Is this still working?
Yeah, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just interested in your own, your own journey too, about, are there times when you've caught yourself with an overbuilt thing, and like, what did you look for? How did you know? If you ever rolled something back and went, that seems like a good idea, but actually that was terrible. That made my relationship to my system worse. Do you have any, I wonder if you have any of those?
Yeah, sure. One thing that occurs to me was, so I've done so many systems over the years, and I think it's been in some ways a really enlightening journey. At the very beginning, I kept everything in an electronic mind map. Okay, this is going back a long way.
Right.
And it was not very long, and everything was in there, all the context and all the projects and all the project support material, and it was all in there. And this was back in the days when, it was pretty easy to overload a PC. And I knew I was in trouble when, I would load this mind map and, smoke would rise from my from my desktop PC.
Oh
Quite that bad,
man.
but it was sort of in that direction. You could just hear the processor going, "Help me, help me." So I moved on from that, and I decided I was going to go paper, and I did that for a while. Well, of course, with a digital calendar and with email, of course, but it was just paper, and that was really interesting and in some ways very very helpful. Um, I ended up in more or less straightforward Outlook, right, for a while on the PC. And then over the years, I've tried some other things. I'm now on a Mac these days, so going through a phase where I moved from a Windows machine to a Mac, and so I'm using some of the Mac software. Um, Flirted, I think, with Outlook for Mac plus um, OneNote. And those of you who are familiar with the Microsoft toolset may have experience of OneNote or may have heard of OneNote. So OneNote, very tightly integrated with Outlook, and that makes life, really easy as you're moving stuff around. And in my head, what it was going to make sense for, and the reason I was quite excited about it was it's a sort of a lightly structured way to hold on to loads of information. And I thought, this is great. This is where I'm going to keep my project support material, and this is where I'm going to keep my, the more the higher volume things that are part of my system. And in theory, that worked quite well for a little while. And then what I realized was that the friction between Outlook and OneNote, even though again they're both Microsoft tools and they're very tightly integrated, even that friction was getting in the way of my productivity. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think, as I'm thinking about my own journey, maybe one other thing to say is, the end of the year is coming up. It's not, if you got a little bit of time, not a bad time to be thinking about just start over, right? Just start over with a brand new tool and see what that does for you. Please back up and print out everything you've got, right? So you don't lose anything necessarily, but that can be very liberating in my experience. I don't know. What do you reckon?
That's not a bad idea at all. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And even with the same tool, if you started, overbuilding to some
Hmm.
extent, you might want to go back to zero. And I've found actually the printout approach to be an amazing way to do what I call a system transition weekly review, which is a big review that involves really scrutinizing those projects, those actions to see, look, is it really stated in a really GTD friendly way? Do I really need all those, 6 level deep nested folders for all my areas of focus and whatever else, or is there a more slick, straightforward way, to do that? And I've certainly been guilty of overbuilding. I think at this point, I find, I have a low frustration tolerance for the system, not giving me back what I need quickly and easily. So I've really gotten to where that stuff gets rejected out of my world pretty quickly. But one recently was that I started kind of subdividing my inbox a little bit, kind of going, this is work based and this is personal. And then I just got into a bad habit of moving personal stuff into that personal area during work hours, rather than realizing quite a few of those things were 2-minute actions, and actually just taking a quick 2-minute response on that, could easily cut the amount that collects to work on nights and evenings in half or less. So then I found myself dreading this bigger inbox, as it were, of personal stuff that actually, the number was large, but when I got down to it, I realized I could have progressed that forward several days ago with a quick 2-minute reply.
Mm.
So that was an interesting thing that, even 20 years out of doing GTD, you can fall into these little traps, these little things where you go, oh, that's that could be a little enhancement. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are little enhancements. Um, but it can be insidious, as well as it can be, pretty, large scale as well. This kind of overbuilding. Um, so yeah, I think people, probably really want to know, how will I know that things are overbuilt, and how will I zone in? How will I hone in on at least one next step or one area that I can look at, to potentially simplify my system and therefore streamline my relationship to it. If you were coaching me, for example, and you were scrutinizing my systems and going in there, what would be your strategy to try and figure out where where I'm experiencing the pain of being overbuilt? What would you look for?
Yeah, I think it's a really helpful question. So the first thing I think I would do, two approaches come to mind, right? One is use the 5 phase model, what we call the workflow model, to walk yourself through each of those phases and ask yourself the question in each one of these phases, does it feel to me like this is as effective and efficient and friction free as it could be, right? So when it comes to capture, how easily and quickly can I get ideas out of my head into some place where I know I will see it again so that I can make a decision about it, right? So does that feel, reasonably friction free? Or does it feel like I've got 8 different inboxes or even just 2 different inboxes, but because I've got two, I'm not, to your point just a minute ago, I'm not engaging with them helpfully, right? So that would be one phase. Then, you'd get into clarifying. Do I have the right tool set so that as I make decisions about these things based on the clarifying questions, that I'm in a position to do that effectively and efficiently? If I think about the organizing phase, does my system have clean edges? Do I have the right lists? Do I need to be going back to the point from earlier? Do I need to sort of pare back the number of lists, sort of go back to basics? So you could use, and again, just to complete the model, if I go into reflect, what's it like for me to use my system? Can I trust that my system will be reminding me about the right things at the right times? Can I see the right dials? If you think about sort of the dashboard metaphor, can I see the right dials at the right moments so that, if I'm getting ready for a board meeting, I have the right reminders in front of me of the things I need to be reminded about. If I'm getting ready for some time at home and I'm feeling like, my DIY self is showing up, am I going to be reminded about the right things at home, right? And then ultimately, am I in a position to make good decisions about all of that? So that would be one, would be use that core model as a way to atomize a bit, right? To break apart how you're working and make sure that everything feels like it's as friction free as possible. And again, that's the kind of work, the number of coachings that we as a company do these days with experienced GTDers, an awful lot of the work that we do is that, right? It's just trying to figure that out for people because they've got systems and they don't feel like they're, working as effectively as they could. So that's a big part of what we do. So that was thing one. Thing two, I think, would be just take a few things, capture a few things, and then very deliberately walk them through the whole process, right? So capture, clarify, organize, reflect, engage, and just make sure, yeah, that feels as friction free as possible. It takes me back quite often when I'm doing coaching with like an executive and executive's assistant team, right? A team of 2. One of the things that we'll do quite often is we'll do, I call them case studies, but basically it's just, we've set up a system for the assistant, we've set up a system for the executive, and now what we're going to do is, okay, an email comes into the executive's inbox. Let's walk this through. What exactly is going to happen? How is a decision going to get made about what that means? How is the result of that decision process going to make its way into some sort of an organizational bucket where it's helpful that either the assistant or the executive sees it? So that kind of more, if you think about the 5 phase model as kind of a vertical approach, that's a bit more of a horizontal approach, but I think again can help you to come up with some good, some realization and maybe some inspiration for change.
That's great. Yeah, no, the 5 phase model is absolutely, I think, really solid and comprehensive way to go about all of that. I think that's fantastic advice. The other thing I think of is just the threefold nature of work as well. Of how easy is it for you to define your work? How easy is it for you to work from predefined work? And how easy is it for you to know what interruptions to accept as truly important and timely, or deal with in terms of just capturing them for later if they weren't truly important and timely? And how easy is it for you to get back to whatever it was you were working on once you've dealt with an appropriate interruption. So I think that's also another place where you kind of get at the same thing, right? It's where it shows up. It's all about input and output ultimately. And is that input and output from between you and your system, is that slick, or is that is that sluggish, basically? Because I think for a lot of people, we're used to kind of pushing systems up hills, and we're used to kind of dealing with something cumbersome. But for your own personal productivity system, man, you have a chance to create a system that's actually as enjoyable as possible to use. Like, go for it, this is your system. I think a lot of people don't realize, yes, GTD is a methodology you learned from someone else, from David, the wonderful inventor of this thing. But the system, as you build it, you have a chance to make it work as close to the speed of thought as you can get it.
You were talking earlier, and this occurred to me. I think maybe the flexibility of GTD, in some ways, the downside of that is it creates this problem, right? We're not selling software. If we were selling software and we were selling the GTD app, right, then it would be okay. Here you go. There's the app, and we'll help you to configure it, and off you go. But because we say, no, we have the thought process, and we have the methodology, and the various models, and we're going to help you to implement that, right? Because there is that freedom. Some people end up, the wrong end of the spectrum with 82 different tools that do things that overlap and don't work well together, et cetera. So that might be one of the downsides of the freedom that's kind of baked into GTD as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Well, we're coming near to our typical time for how long we let these guys run, and how long we let ourselves riff about all things GTD. Just parting thoughts on taking this away and making this practical for those listening, so that you can see if you're overbuilt, in any big or small way, and support yourself in streamlining the system.
Yeah, I think for an awful lot of people in the current reality, with a lot more working from home, that's kind of being paralleled in a lot of organizations with an additional implementation. A lot of organizations are rolling out what we used to call groupware, so things like Microsoft Teams and Slack and their ilk. And so sometimes these are new tools that are foisted on you, right? But you can use exactly the same approach, right? Ask yourself the question: what role is this going to play in my new system? Is this something I'm going to use for capture? Is it something I'm going to use for organizing? If so, now that it's a team thing, right? Something I'm doing with other people, do I need to have a conversation about how the information in that is organized so that we can all best interact with it? So yeah, I think being thoughtful and a bit ruthless about what the tools are and how you're using them, especially in an environment where new tools are coming at us, and we're adapting to new ways of working in the new reality, I think would be helpful. But what do you think?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. I think it's such a great point, and we could easily do a riff on the intersection of group tools with personal tools, for quite a long time. But yeah, I just think it's so worth investing in spending a little time thinking about your tool at the meta level. One of the best ways to do any kind of meta level thinking about GTD is in the weekly review. I think so. Not only just doing the steps to get the system up to date, but using that as a framework or an opportunity to look at and review, how is the system doing? How am I doing with the system? Are there lists I avoid? Are there lists I gravitate toward? How easy is it to do a weekly review is often an indication of, is your system overbuilt or not? And if it is a short, sharp 60-minute review, you're probably doing pretty well, or it's underrepresented in there. That's also a possibility. But if it's a really laborious process, then it may be that your systems are overbuilt. So look out for that. Well, thank you, Todd. Great conversation as always. For those of you tuned in, as I said, we could do all kinds of other topics. We always love to hear from you. If you have thoughts and suggestions, you can just email info@next-action.co.uk. That's a great way to reach us. And if you are tuning in, if you're not already subscribed on all the pod webs and intercasts and tubes that we're on, be sure to hit subscribe, and then basically we come to you. It'll be a really easy way to get notified of subsequent podcasts and other videos that we and our colleagues are putting out. For now, from me, from Todd, thanks for tuning in. Hope you go and streamline your relationship to your system as best you can, and get a nice breath of fresh air from doing so. And we'll see you next time.